Hi everybody, thanks for choosing me. I just wanted to say before I start that it's an absolute pleasure to be back here in New Zealand and Wellington particularly. One of the things I find really humbling about coming to New Zealand is Pakeha engagement with Indigenous culture, and I think what you people do here it puts Australia to shame, and I'm embarrassed for my own country's inability to engage in a meaningful way with its Indigenous community. So it's something I think a lot about when I'm here, and now is no exception. I work at ACMI. We are Australia's premier institution of the moving image, which is why I can use this so well.
Let's go.
Yeah, we're all good now. So ACMI is the Australian Centre for the Moving Image. It was established in 1946, predominantly as a lending library. So it lent films to film societies, schools, universities, both to educate people about film, but also to educate people on other things through film. So you name a topic, we've got a film on it. We've got 117 films on glass blowing, for instance, as we found out recently when someone inquired about that. And then, like they were asking for something from the back room, they wanted to know if we had films on Venetian styles of glass blowing. We have 17 films on that. So we have 157,219 items in our collection. That's obviously an approximate figure. Predominantly single-channel moving image works, but also games, 3D objects and time-based media art. One of the things that's happening right now, it's a really interesting time, is that the people that had access to amateur filmmaking equipment for the first time are now all in their 70s and 80s. They are dying, or they have died, and their family or they themselves are thinking about what they will do with this material. I love home movies, and I first became interested in them when I worked at the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies and the National Film and Sound Archive. The AIATSIS home movie collections, often they were trips across the desert by train, and every time they stopped at a roadside refuelling station, for want of a better word, they'd film out the window. More often than not, there were groups of Aboriginal people living by the track. So they were unintentional moments of Aboriginal interaction with white Australia captured that way. The thing that was most resonant to me at the Film and Sound Archive was a home movie collection made by a train enthusiast, and most film enthusiasts seem to be train nuts as well. But he was one of the first troops on the ground after the bomb in Hiroshima, and he made a home movie of the devastation he saw. So a lot of what we deal with is a bit playful, but there's a number of instances where these types of films have a real meaning for us now. I like them because they're unencumbered by commercial or political imperatives. And I don't want to get too Margaret Mead on everybody. I'm not suggesting that they are showing life as it would be if the camera wasn't there, but they're telling a very simple, honest story. And in fact, they're often very intimate because the filmmaker and the subjects of the films generally have an intimate relationship. They're often family members or friends. So we're watching a very intimate, natural engagement with both filmmaker and subject. As I say, we've got this massive proliferation now of material being offered to us, and it is a weekly phenomenon now that someone comes forward with a collection of home movies. They are often surprised that an institution such as ours is so enthusiastically welcoming of the material. We like to collect the story of the filmmaker as well. We like to contextualise the collection with the filmmaker's story. And they have fantastic research potential, both for social, economic and political research, But increasingly they're now being used by people like restoration architects to look at a streetscape or a building as it was being built, or in an earlier period when they're doing reconstruction works. One example is our War Memorial in Melbourne. They wanted to renovate the forecourt, and we're able to show them film from the 30s when it was being built. So what do? We receive the collection in a hat box, in a cardboard box, lovingly gifted by a member of the family. We do an initial inventory to try and establish the scope of the collection, and we undertake a condition report. While we have a digitisation priority, things often have to queue jump because of condition or relative perceived cultural significance. We prepare the material for scanning, and someone just asked me if we undertake at ACMI a lot of analogue preservation. What we tend to do is stabilise the material, get it into a condition where it can be scanned, and then we're not really dealing with the analogue past that point. We're just stabilising it in cold storage. We put new leaders on, we clean it and so on. We do pretty much all formats. So 35mm, 16mm film, we can scan at 4K or 2K. Super 8, Standard 8, 9.5, and we also do most formats of magnetic tape. BVU, U-matic, VHS, 1-inch, 2-inch, and so on. So scanning is a real-time process. If it's an hour of film, it takes an hour to scan. In fact, it takes about an hour and 20 minutes by the time you load up the reel, prep the machine, and so on. If it's badly shrunk, and we can deal with film that's shrunk up to about 1.6%, we'll often scan at below real time. So 24 frames a second, we might scan at 12 or even 6. So an hour of film is now suddenly taking 2 or 4 hours to scan. We produce a ProRes 4444 overscan master, and I'll explain what overscan is in a minute. And we also make 2 access copies, both an overscan and a presentation version. Then we accession the item, we quality control it, we create a checksum, and we catalogue the material. So a checksum, everyone know what a checksum is? Digital fingerprint that just identifies that the file you've moved is identical from the source file. Quality control is a real-time process for us, so we watch every single frame of the Pres master to confirm its veracity. So we estimate it takes 8 hours for every hour of analogue material to fully go through the digitisation process. 157,219 things, that's 157,219 days, divided by 5 staff. Still seems like a lot. There's one of the staff. He's sitting doing digital tape capture. There's our Sintel scanner, 35mm, 16mm. There's the analogue video rack. I draw your attention to the sticker that says seems to work. That's a U-matic machine. It seemed easier to put that sticker on the one that seems to work rather than a sticker on the other 7 that definitely don't work. It saved 7 post-it notes. The National Film and Sound Archive recently released a white paper, I guess you'd call it, called Deadline 2025, in which they say we have until 2025 to digitise all magnetic media before it will be either
it's not coming through there.
unstable.
But the best way to tell is to have a walk around. And have a listen. Explain.
Right.
Hey.
I don't think that was an evacuation tone.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Yeah,
the other problem, of course, we have not only is the media itself deteriorating, but maintaining the equipment is becoming increasingly problematic. So 8 years to get 36,481 VHS tapes digitised at a day a throw. Oops.
Sorry, how many did you say?
VHS tapes, 36,481. Again, that's an approximate figure. This is Angus. He's sitting working on the small gauge 8mm machine. So,
People have hopefully seen, read and talked about a fair bit over the past few weeks and months. Our dial...
So why do we do it? Well, to date we've scanned 435 films with a total of 1,305 digital files output. We are fully licensing them in what I guess you would call is a Creative Commons zero effect. We've chosen an opt-out license, so there are degrees of optness. The most generous license is online access, download and remix, and then there are degrees of restriction all the way to on-site access only. In most cases, the families are incredibly happy that this material has another life. They are delighted that people want to play with it, be they students, artists, or people just wanting to learn the software. It's available for research, student and artist remix, as I said. And what is really important is that we provide this material with a context. We see ourselves as an interpretation gateway rather than just an enormous bucket of content. So, overscan. This is my colleague Linda Bernard's grandfather's paper mache elephant, which she didn't provide. This actually came to us from a random donor. As you can see, it's being used in a street parade, but one of the things that happens when we overscan is we get all of this additional information in the margin. So there's what the filmmaker made, there's what everybody has always seen when this was projected in their living room. But in fact, there's all that additional information in the margin. And in some cases, it's up to a quarter of additional information. So the entire surface of the film was light sensitive. If the camera wasn't masked well enough, you got all of this additional information. So again, here's what everybody's seen for the last 60 years. And there's that little bit of additional information. In this case, it tells you not to take grapes across the state border because of vine viruses. So we can establish the earliest date at which that sign was erected. Or in the case of Mission in Central Australia, Hermannsburg, there's a very famous church, everyone's familiar with the stone church, but there was a time in the 30s where they built grass huts and people wanted to do a restoration, a reconstruction of those grass huts. No one could quite remember where they were in relation to the church. And then we found footage, which in that case, that little bit of extra information helped geolocate those huts. Again, the filmmaker intended us just to see the scene. And what we've got is someone watching the filmmaker. So there's this incidental, sort of naive moment, if you will, that's been captured. Similarly, you see this slightly enigmatic figure, ghost-like figure in the margin. My favourite is this. The young girl in the red with the fantastic hair is actually one of our board members, and she gave us her father's collection, 10 rolls of film that shows her life from birth to her 21st birthday, and the brand new red Tirana she got for her birthday present. So that's her dad, and her mum Dorothy on this occasion is behind the camera. So that's what the family's seen all these years. But Stuart was at the picnic too. So I don't know what everybody's got against Stuart, but let the record show he was there. So, as I say, it's a bit of whimsy as well, but it can have serious research benefits. One of the other things we're doing is the 8mm footage. This is excuse me, this is standard 8. It's very noisy, very grainy, particularly a lot of the indoor shots. So on the left, you can see the original footage and it's quite noisy. And on this side, we've reduced the noise. It's a bit softer, and we could sharpen it. And for those of you that play in Photoshop and know about sharpening, you can go too far and it can look quite crunchy. Now, we're not in a position to do this to every one of the films we scan. What we want to demonstrate is that this is possible and that we have all the data captured for you to achieve that result, but we invite the community to put that effort in. So we're reaching out to the trained nuts or the social researchers or the historians or filmmakers to take this material and improve it if they want to, and return those results to us. So we're trying to engage the community and harness some of that resource that we couldn't possibly do in our own institution. So you can see that it makes it eminently more watchable, even at the sacrifice to a bit of clarity, a bit of sharpness. The denoised version, I think, is much easier to watch. And as I say, we've always got the ProRes master to go back to, should we wish. No sooner do we make a beautiful, clean preservation copy and we get rid of the clock leader and we remove all the crap at the head and the tail, someone comes along and says, we'd really love to use that in an art project. So we're now collecting high-res scans of the tail and the head of every film, and we're locating these interesting mistakes, I guess you'd call them, for potential art projects. So you'll probably be familiar with this, if not as personal experience from movies. This is where a frame has got stuck in the projector and the heat of the incandescent lamp has immediately fried the frame. We're now collecting them by the thousands. And they're beautiful, some of them, I think. So, as I say, we're contextualising this information. We have now got a portal on our website. All the films are on YouTube, but we direct people to that content through our website, where we provide the rationale for why we're collecting this material, and then we tell some contextualising story about the filmmaker or the family involved. Tony Agapitos was a Greek migrant, came to Australia in the 50s. He went down to the docks every time the Patras docked, and he recorded Greek migrants, Greek and Italian migrants coming off the ship. He's identified all the families. He's told us the times and the dates of all the events they went to. It's incredibly meaningful for that community to be able to access that material. Oh, there's some websites, but if you just go to ACMI's website and hunt around, you'll find it. We are demonstrating what you can do with this material. As I say, we are flat out preserving it, but we want to demonstrate what's possible. So I just thought I'd finish with this little clip that was made in-house, almost entirely from home movies, and it's about sunglasses. Oh, and it should have sound. Michael, sound. Thank you. Can we start again? Thank you. Did I say premier institution for the moving image? Oh, far out. Big shout out to my staff for making all of this possible. And no surprise to you if you're watching online that I've messed this up. Yeah. This time for sure.
It's just a boy and I'm a girl, you know. Then we still have time for a couple of questions. Is there any questions? Yes, there are questions. The microphone will just come down. We'll just make sure it's turned on properly.
I was just curious, you mentioned how much stuff is now emerging and finding its way into your hands. Is there any active effort being made to reach out to people and say this is a place where it can get digitised, this is a place where it can be preserved? And if so, do you have an appetite to get that much more material?
And that's probably almost the answer to the question. It's what we can cope with. It's certainly now developing a bit of a mind of its own, so the more people are hearing about it, the more they are coming forward. We're finding that Facebook groups are actually finding our footage, picking it up and reposting it. That's leading to people coming forward. We haven't got any plans to make an orchestrated campaign. We are trying to engage more in things like International Home Movie Day and demonstrate that we have this capacity. That's a tricky thing. Because it takes so long to achieve a digital version, it has the potential to really disappoint. So everybody comes along on the day, they've got all their material, there's a sort of YouTube expectation that it'll just magically be digital, and in fact we're going to get to, you know, one person's one role. So we're trying to find a way that we can generate enthusiasm and invite those people to bring that material forward, but maintain that level of enthusiasm. We would really struggle to cope with too much more material coming through the door. But it's a really salient point.
Could you leverage any kind of groundswell like that to go for more funding or to expand your operation?
That's how we've been proceeding in the last couple of years, to great effect. And in fact, while we're one of the smallest collecting institutions in the state of Victoria, our deterioration issues are actually now recognised by government as being some of the most pressing. So there's actually quite a momentum happening now. We've secured $500,000 over the next 3 years to ramp this up, and we've put in a bid for a bit more over the next 5 years. So yeah, we're doing what we can. I hope to be retired before the VHS wave of home movies strikes. But no, it's a good point.
Thank you.
Victoria.
Being the copyright geek in the room, can you tell me a bit more about your licensing structure and perhaps the negotiations you've undergone with families?
Yeah, sure. And I'm happy to give you my card and send you a copy of the licence. It's pretty plain English, and it's been built internally by our own governance team. It's based around a Zero Commons licence, but we've tried to frame it in sort of common language. They are often quite personal relationships, so this is somebody handing over their family's material. So more often than not, there are deceased people in the films. The filmmaker themselves may have died. That may have been a recent thing. So there are some sensitivities just in dealing with somebody's family memories. So we tend to engage in a conversation with those people and assure them that the material is safe, that we will restrict anything they wish to have restricted by public access. We had one request that naked baby footage be excised out of the public access version, for instance. So we're having that conversation before we get to the licence point. The licence, as I say, has, I think it's 4 or 5 categories. The most open licence is online download remix.
You know, when we were...
Then it's online access only, then it's on-site access, and then it's research and education use only. So it gets increasingly more restrictive. Typically, we already know what the rights holder will bear before we present that licence. So if we get a sense that they will not want it to be downloaded and remixed, we will have already excised that portion out of the contract. But I'll give you my card. Happy to share the licence agreement with you. Thanks again.
Thank you.